My name is Hannah Reed. I'm 35 years old, and last Christmas taught me a brutal lesson about what my family truly thought of me. It started the way it always did, with a joke at my expense. We were halfway through dinner, the table crowded with plates and forced smiles, when my mother leaned back in her chair, waved her fork, and said loudly, "So, are you still doing that little internet work of yours, or have you finally found a real job yet?" Laughter rippled around the table. My brother Evan laughed the hardest. I smiled, like I always do. I swallowed the familiar sting and nodded, pretending it didn't bother me. What none of them noticed was that I had planned the entire dinner. I'd spent weeks coordinating it, ordering premium food, scheduling deliveries, making sure everything arrived hot and on time. To them, it just happened, just like everything I did. In their minds, I was still the struggling daughter with vague freelance work and questionable life choices. When the conversation drifted, again, toward Evan's huge potential and the future he was definitely going to turn around someday, I slipped into the living room to check my laptop. One tab was still open. A dashboard. Numbers updating in real time. Years of work quietly summarized into one figure. I thought I closed it. I didn't. A few minutes later, Evan walked in looking for a place to sit. He stopped mid-step. "What is that?" Then he shouted for everyone. In seconds, the same people who were mocking my fake job were standing behind me staring at the screen. $14 million. The room went dead silent. And just like that, I went from being a joke to being treated like a family ATM. I didn't wake up one morning with $14 million. This started long before that. I grew up in a small, overcrowded apartment outside the city. My father died when I was 10, and overnight everything changed. Bills piled up, stress filled the air, and my mother shifted all her energy toward Evan. He was 2 years older than me, loud, emotional, always going through something. Whenever he struggled, my mom hovered over him like he might break. Whenever I succeeded, she barely looked up. "You're strong," she'd say. "You'll figure it out." What sounded like praise was really an excuse. I learned early that I was the low-maintenance one, the one who didn't need help, so I stopped asking. I cooked, I cleaned, I packed my own lunches. Evan stayed in his room yelling at sports games, already obsessed with numbers in a way that would later turn ugly. By high school, I understood something clearly. If I wanted a different life, I'd have to build it myself. I joined clubs just to stay at school longer. I taught myself coding on free websites. I discovered investing by accident in the library and felt something click. Money didn't have to be feared, it could be understood. I worked part-time, saved quietly, and bought my first tiny investment with money no one noticed was missing. When I won an academic award, my mom promised to come, then skipped it to take Evan to a game. That was the night I stopped hoping they'd ever see me. College wasn't a miracle. It was spreadsheets, deadlines, and exhaustion. I filled out my own financial aid forms while chaos filled the apartment. When I got accepted with partial scholarships, my mom said she was proud, distractedly. Evan called it nerd school. I moved into a tiny dorm and felt free for the first time. I studied finance, I coded at night, I freelanced. I learned how money actually moved. Back home, nothing improved. Evan dropped out of school and started gambling. Just small bets, he said. Until my mom called crying, thousands of dollars gone. I sent money when I could. I worked myself into exhaustion while pretending everything was fine. When I graduated with honors and landed a job at a fintech startup, no one came to my ceremony. I took my own photo. That job changed my life. I learned how startups worked, how investments grew, how early decisions mattered. I started investing on my own, quietly. I also made a mistake. I began sending my mother $2,000 a month. She thanked me and used much of it to cover Evan's gambling. Still, she called my work that online thing. Over time, my investments grew. One startup took off. Another got acquired. I realized something terrifying and empowering. I was good at this. I left my job, started my own small investment firm, and lived carefully. The first year was brutal. Some bets failed, others exploded. By the time my net worth crossed 8 digits, the number felt less like luck and more like math finally balancing out. I kept living modestly. I kept my mouth shut. I knew exactly what would happen if they found out. Then Christmas came.
My mom called panicked about money, about giving Evan a proper holiday. She hinted about a car. I said no. Instead, I offered to handle dinner. All of it. I spent about $3,000, planned like a business deal. On Christmas Day, everyone complimented the food. Then my mom made the joke. Hannah works on the computer, some unstable freelance thing. Evan added, must be nice to sit around on a laptop all day. I smiled. Then I stepped away to check my email. That's when everything broke. I heard Evan shout my name. I walked in and saw my laptop open. The dashboard. The number. $14 million. No one congratulated me. They accused me. How could you hide this? You let us struggle. You owe us. Evan said he deserved it more. My mother said that's what a good daughter would do. And something in me finally snapped. I told them the truth. I told them about the nights they ignored, the help I never got, the money I'd already sent, the boundaries I was done crossing. I told them I was done paying. Evan lunged toward my laptop. I warned him. I left. They tried to destroy me online, so I hired a lawyer. Cease and desist letters shut everything down fast. Without my money, reality hit them hard. Evan eventually was forced into treatment. My mom lost the house. It hurt, but it wasn't my fault. My life got quieter, clearer. I invested in programs helping young women who grow up being told, you'll be fine, because I know what that really means. Money didn't change my family. It exposed them. And the most valuable thing I gained was boundaries.
I didn't cry when I got into my car. That surprised me. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, Christmas lights blinking in the windows behind me, my phone vibrating nonstop in the cup holder. Missed calls, messages, notifications from the family group chat exploding like fireworks. Still, no tears. I think I'd already done all my grieving years ago, quietly, in moments no one noticed. By the time I got back to my apartment, my phone battery was nearly dead. I plugged it in, kicked off my shoes, and finally looked at the screen. My mother had posted on Facebook. A long one. The kind designed to make people feel sorry for her. She didn't use my name directly at first. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. She talked about betrayal, about how money changes people, about how a child she raised had forgotten where she came from and chosen greed over family. Then Evan jumped into the comments. He wrote about his mental health struggles, about how I refused to help when he was at his lowest, about how some people cared more about numbers on a screen than blood. The comments flooded in. Some sympathetic, some confused, some quietly judgmental. I stared at it all, feeling oddly detached, like I was watching a show I'd already seen the ending to. I didn't reply. Instead, I emailed my lawyer. The next morning, I expected guilt to hit me like a truck. It didn't. What I felt was exhaustion, the deep, bone-level kind you get when you've been holding something up for too long and finally let go. My lawyer called me that afternoon. He didn't tell me to ignore it. He told me I had options. Words like defamation, harassment, and false representation entered the conversation. He explained, calmly, that I was not required to tolerate public lies, even from family. Within days, he drafted formal cease and desist letters addressed to both my mother and Evan. Clear, professional, firm. They were required to remove defamatory posts, stop contacting me for money, stop implying I owed them financial support. If they didn't comply, the next step would be legal action. I approved it. No hesitation. My mother called me the moment she received the letter. She was furious. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed. "Lawyers are for enemies. I gave birth to you." I stayed calm. "I asked you to stop lying," I said. "You didn't. This is the consequence." She accused me of tearing the family apart. I didn't argue. Because the truth was, the family had been cracked long before I ever stood up for myself.
Evan tried a different tactic. He sent long messages about stress, about pressure, about how money would fix everything if I'd just trust him. I didn't respond. Within a week, their posts disappeared. The public outrage quietly fizzled when there was no drama left to feed on. Then reality showed up. Without my monthly transfers, the financial holes became impossible to hide. Evan couldn't deposit money into betting apps anymore. Cards were maxed. Credit dried up. The people he owed weren't as patient as my mother. There were calls, visits, arguments that ended with slammed doors. A few months later, a cousin reached out privately. She told me Evan had finally been forced into a treatment program after a scare involving the police. Nothing dramatic, just enough to scare my mother into realizing she couldn't protect him forever. He was angry. But for the first time, he was being held accountable. My mother tried to manage on her own. She borrowed, she shuffled debt, she sold things online, but the sympathy she'd gathered online began to thin when people noticed patterns, new purchases mixed with constant emergencies. Questions followed. Eventually, she sold the house. I found out secondhand. A relative sent me the listing with a short message. I know this hurts, but I also know it's not your fault. They were right. That house had been on fire for years. I just stopped pouring money into the flames. Meanwhile, my life became quiet. Peacefully so. I hired help at work, set boundaries, slept through the night. I also did something I'd never told my family, and never would. I dedicated a portion of my profits to financial education programs for young women who grow up being the strong one. The planners, the fixers, the invisible achievers. Girls who are told you'll be fine instead of being supported. Because I know how dangerous that sentence can be. Sometimes late at night, I think about that Christmas dinner. For a long time, I hated that my biggest success was revealed in the ugliest moment of my life. Now, I see it differently. That night didn't destroy my family. It exposed them. Money didn't change who they were. It just removed the mask. And the most important thing I gained wasn't $14 million. It was freedom.
For a while, everything was quiet. Not the awkward kind of quiet filled with guilt and second-guessing, but the kind that lets you breathe again. The kind that makes you realize how loud your life used to be. Then, one night, my phone buzzed. It was Evan. I hadn't heard from him in months. The message was short, too calm, to be honest. "I'm doing better. I'm in a program. We should talk." I stared at the screen longer than I wanted to admit. Old instincts kicked in, the part of me trained to fix, to rescue, to soften consequences before they fully landed. I didn't reply. Not yet. A week later, another message came through. Longer this time. He talked about therapy, about learning responsibility, about how he'd finally realized gambling wasn't just a phase. Then he mentioned money. Not directly, just carefully placed phrases like getting back on my feet and needing a little help to restart. I closed the message. That was when I understood something important. Growth that depends on someone else's wallet isn't growth, it's delay. My mother tried next. Her message wasn't angry. That was new. It was soft, carefully written, almost polite. She said she missed me, said she was tired, said the apartment was small and lonely, said she wished things could go back to how they were. That line stuck with me, because how they were had never been good for me. It had just been comfortable for them. I wrote back one sentence. "I hope you're well. I'm not ready to reconnect." I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I didn't justify myself. And the world didn't end. A few months later, Evan showed up where I didn't expect him, at my office. He didn't get past reception. Security called me asking if I knew the man asking for me by my first name. I looked at the camera feed on my phone. He looked smaller, older, tired. I told them I wasn't available. They offered to escort him out. I said yes. I didn't watch. That was my last boundary with him.
Life kept moving forward. My firm grew steadily, not explosively, but sustainably. I turned down deals that didn't align with my values. I stopped chasing numbers just to prove something. I moved into a better apartment. Not flashy, just calm. Sunlight, quiet mornings. I made friends who never asked what I earned, only what I cared about. I dated slowly, carefully, with honesty. For the first time in my life, no one needed me to save them. Sometimes I still hear echoes. My mother's voice calling me selfish. Evan's voice saying I owed them. But they're quieter now, distant. They don't run my life anymore. Last Christmas, I spent the holiday differently. No forced dinners, no pretending. I volunteered in the morning at a financial literacy workshop. Teen girls, young women, all of them smart. All of them unsure if they were allowed to want more. In the evening, I cooked a small meal for myself and a couple of friends. We laughed. No one mocked my work. No one demanded proof of my worth. Later that night, I opened my laptop, not to check numbers, but to write something down. A list, not of goals, of boundaries. Here's the truth I wish I'd learned earlier. You don't owe people access to you just because they share your blood. Love without respect is not love, it's control. And success doesn't make you selfish, it reveals who expected to benefit from you staying small. If you're reading this, and you're the reliable one, the planner, the fixer, the person everyone leans on, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to choose peace. And walking away doesn't make you cruel. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you'll ever do.